We do not pay with collars. The docking ring of Louiton's step thrummed beneath Commander Mara Ilias's boots, a low, patient note like breath through a reed. The corridor smelled of hot metal and lemon cleanser. Someone had scrubbed hard to make the place worthy of witnesses. Outside the viewport, the brown dwarf simmered in quiet oranges, its heat rippling the hull plates of the orphaned station. Speakers ticked as they cooled. A thin line of citizens waited at the public mic, each clutching a chipped token stamped "Witness." Index Mara said, fingers resting on the rail. Status of the court beacon. Primed the fleet mind answered in her inner ear voice, crisp as folded paper. Aurora Court Protocol requires a quorum and a declared controversy. We have both. I can open the corridor of law at your word. Make it loud, she said. Make it honest. Show your method, not your threats. The quorum of host shares arrived exactly late, trailing a comb of silver tugs and pale-jawed clerks. Their ships wore painted balances on their flanks, polished like altars. Prefect Valis spoke first, the sort of man who tasted every word for bite before swallowing. By the doctrine of gratitude tax, he said, you will transfer 40% of output for 5 standard cycles. Payment secures protection, salvage, and hosting. Refusal implies theft of services. Mara didn't look at him. She watched the kid at the mic, knuckles white around a witness token. Name, she said gently. Joka Haynes. His voice cracked. Deck 5. Hydrop hydroponics. They came during shift change. Took the coolant grid on account. He lifted his palm. A blister had bubbled under the skin like boiled milk. Said the bill was older than me. Put it on the record. Index pulsed the beacon. The corridor of law unfurled in light, a clear band along the docking tunnel, striping the floor with jurisdiction. Holograph text scrolled in tight columns above the heads of citizens, open definitions, cited clauses, arrows that invited eyes to read. Cameras turned with a soft insect whir. Quorum acknowledges the corridor, Valis said, setting the safe angle of his jaw. We don't fear light. You fear a ledger you did not write, Advocate Jules. Cade murmured at Mara's shoulder. He was a tall, tidy man who wore his tie like an oath. Commander, per Open Beacon Clause 7, we can compel them to state their method, not merely their price. Compel gently, Mara said. She tasted dust. The station's recirculators were older than the doctrine that threatened them. We are not here to humiliate. We are here to count. Their doctrine is humiliation dressed as balance XO. Pavel Rook said, broad arms folded. His knuckles were raw. The docking clamps had jammed and he'd insisted on helping grease them. You give them a mic, they'll sermon. The mic is a mirror, Mara said. The mirror does not lie. A woman wearing an oil-smeared jumpsuit tugged at the mic stand until it lined with the ridge of her spine. I keep the ring bearings, she said. Name's Tanya. My daughter sleeps above the keep warm pipes because the lights are out again. You want 40% of nothing. Fine. We can ship you nothing. Pack it in ribbon. A ripple of laughter from the witnesses frayed at the edges, grateful for even this small defiance. Valis smiled without teeth. Prefect Mara said, letting the corridor of law wash white across her boots, for the record-defined gratitude tax. Valis raised his hands to shoulder height, palms out to show he held no weapon but words. The gratitude obligation is owed by those who survive under a host's shield. The quorum kept traffic lanes clear when the guilds fell. We repaired navigation beacons. We defended against raiders. That cost. Survival entails debt. Debt entails payment. On what valuation, Jules asked. Prevailing rates, Valis said easily. Indexed against risk. Indexed against scarcity. Indexed by whom Jules's voice had a pleasant courtroom fatigue, the tone of a man who had counted the same beans for years and found each one wanting. Please provide the calculation path. Valis tilted his head. He had expected pleas and weapons, not arithmetic. Mr. Cade, Mara said softly, "Don't corner him into silence. Corner him into clarity. Costs return when accounts open." Index slid a thin stack of white into Mara's peripheral. Discovery, they filed a debt chit 3 cycles ago post-raid for services not rendered. The signature is a stamp. The beneficiary is a shelf account. "Speak it on the mic," Mara said. Jules cleared his throat. "Prefect Valis Corridor of Law requires open arithmetic for any levy. You have asserted a cost recovered by a tax. Identify the service, the provider, the date, and the prior notice. If any element is unclear, this corridor will consider the claim unripe." Valis stared at the beacon strip eyes flicking to read the annotations he did not control. Hydrolane Defense, Month 6, Cycle 189. Escort value multiplied by distance capped by scarcity factor. Notice provided via tacked postings at common points. Tacked where Tanya asked, unable to wait. "On the side of your tug as it passed in the dark," Novalis said. "On any registered station within 2 jumps. It is the duty of the protected to monitor postings." Mara felt the deck's hum climb as a tram passed below the sound, like a hand against tin. She imagined a 16-year-old Joka sleeping in old air beside a warm pipe, while some clerk tacked a notice to a board on a station he'd never see. The smell of machine oil and lemon cleanser punched soft behind her eyes. Index Mara thought time. 17 minutes until the quorum clock strikes, Index replied. "Witnesses sufficient. Charges stated. Remedy requested." "Then we invite them to speak their method," Mara said aloud, and nodded to the court beacon, which chimed a polite, irrevocable tone. "No blood, only receipts." Before the first set piece, Mara insisted on a short walk through the market ring, a practice she used to remind herself who math touched. She and Jules walked through rows of net bags and salvaged circuit boards past a tea stall steaming like a morning breath. The stall-keeper's hands shook as he poured. The cup had a hairline crack that turned steam into a thin white spear. "I had a cousin on this guild line," the stall-keeper said without prompting. "Hauled ice. Quorum tugs took his hull when the guild went under. Said he'd flown under their lane. Collateral custody, they called it." "What happened to him?" Mara asked. "Got a job repairing their tax," he said. "Pins notices straight to boards now. Good pay. He doesn't visit." Mara sipped the tea. It tasted of overboiled water and something sweet, a failed fruit. In a window's reflection, she saw her own face drawn tight with the effort of neutrality. She breathed through it and nodded a thank you. Steam wet her cheeks like sea air. Observation Index murmured. "Gratitude tax is an ancestor of the old collar doctrines. Same bones under new cloth." "We don't say collar unless they say it first," Mara replied in thought. "They'll accuse us of rage." "Statistically true," Index said. "Yet rage can be harnessed like wind." "Not today," she said. "Law is a ship we steer." Back at the corridor of law, Valis had arranged his clerks like oars. They stood at careful intervals, tablets bright as polished shells. XO Rook loomed not far away, pretending to adjust a flex conduit. The crowd had swelled. The mic's red light looked like an ember in a hearth grown by hands. Jules raised his hand just enough to be recorded. "Commander Ilyas, the quorum has described a tax based on service risk and scarcity. They have not provided a calculation path. I request the corridor issue a show your math order." "Granted," Mara said. "Prefect Valis, choose one living example. Calculate in public." Valis did not flinch. "The raid on the hydro lane," he said. "We deployed 4 tugs, 3 escorts, and a tender. We repelled 2 pirate clippers. We expended consumables and risked hulls. These figures are meaningless without dates, logs, and loss reports," Jules said. "Also, beneficiary identification. Your shelf account is not a person." A laugh snorted from the back. The mic crackled when someone stifled it too close. Public Ledger Access Index whispered in Mara's mind. "We can mirror their claim into our archive and show its gaps." Not yet, Mara thought. "We'll teach by invitation before we teach by reflection. Your tithe owes us interest." Prefect Mara said aloud. You've named 2 pirate clippers, captain designations. We don't annotate raiders with respect, Valis said. We annotate them because their capture pays, Jules said without warmth. If you took their cargo under your banner, that mitigates your cost. List the offsets. Valis exhaled through his nose. We recovered 9 modular stacks of processed ice. We auctioned locally and regionally. The proceeds defrayed operations. How much defrayed, Mara asked. Numbers, not poetry. Valis's lips thinned, 2/3. Then you seek to recover 1/3 from the station, Jules said. Minus the cost of your advertising and administrative tax. Minus the hazard pay, Valis said. Minus depreciation. Minus the cost of the coolant you confiscated on account this morning, Tanya said from the crowd. That was not yours to count. That was ours. Valis's clerks tapped corrections, eyes, busy hands, quiet. They were good at being quiet in crowded rooms. Quiet made a doctrine sound like a truth instead of a tactic. Count what you stole, then count us. Index fed numbers through Mara's visual field. Raid date mismatched the auction posting. 2 of the tugs listed hadn't existed yet. The tender had been elsewhere on a dry dock job. The math crawled like a wounded animal toward a conclusion it refused. Prefect Mara said it appears your ledger walks before its legs are grown. You accuse me of fraud, Valis said softly. I accuse you of haste, Mara said, and of forgetting that gratitude cannot be priced like weather. You cannot post a storm's bill 3 years later and call it grace. Valis lifted his chin. There are callers gentler than your words. There was a space in the corridor where breath thinned. The crowd felt that word hit bone. Numbers remember, fists forget. Jules did not blink. You said it, he murmured to Mara. Proceed. Prefect Valis Mara said, hands open, voice as collected as a doctor setting a fracture. You invoked callers. Do you mean the residual host custody doctrine, also called by the quorum the gentle caller? If so, say so on the record. Valis stared at her. He had the look of a man who had been offered a step forward and found himself instead at a drop. He could retreat or leap. He leaped. Yes, he said. Residual host custody. Permanent rate if payments falter. Gentle in that it preserves the host. Preserves the host by owning the neck, XO, Rook rumbled. By preventing flight, Valis corrected. Everyone benefits from predictability. Open the quorum, hear the witness. Mara gestures, brought up the witness lantern, pale, gold, and honest. We'll hear 3 witnesses before remedy, she said. If anyone's throat feels a hand on it, now is when you lift it. The line shifted. The first witness was a teacher with chalk under his nails. There was chalk still in space ground from old gypsum. He spoke of students solving for time with no clocks, hands knowing when pumps groaned more than when bells chimed. The second was a ship's painter, eyes full of colors, stations only borrowed from nebulae. She spoke of lining a patch over a crease in a hull as if dressing a wound. The third was an old woman wearing a coat that had been mended more than it had aged. She leaned into the mic as if it were a granddaughter. My husband signed a collar once, she said, each syllable its own freight. He wore it for 10 years. When the host pulled the collar cut, there was no blood. There was debt. It choked him dead and kept his mouth smiling. Valis listened. He did not smirk. He knew better than to spit on a ghost. Remedy, Jules said. We're ready. Your doctrine condemns your doctrine. Index Mara whispered inside, prepare the mirror. Arrays aligned, Index said. On your mark, I will reflect their declared doctrine back along its own arithmetic path. Receipts will present. Be aware, this will not merely scold. It will charge. Charge gently, Mara thought. You cannot gently turn a tide, Index said, but it softened the edge in its tone. Mara lifted her hand. We seek an injunction, she said. Quorum's levy stands unripe until a calculation path is shown and a beneficiary with standing identified. Pending, we propose the corridor of law mirror. For each declared cost, an equal audit is applied to the quorum's gains derived from this station including collateral seizures and auction proceeds. Excess collections return with interest to the source. Interest rate equals the quorum's own scarcity factor. Absurd, Valis said, but sweat had turned the hollow under his eyes dark. You would reverse our doctrine to scour us. Reverse it to balance you, Jules said. This corridor does not punish. It levels. Mirror their tax into their past. Index hummed a tone felt more than heard, a ribbon of sensation across the teeth. The mirror arrays were not weapons. They were accountants with perfect memory. They took the quorum's posted doctrine, accepted it as law, and slid it like sapele wood across a plane until it lined with reality's grain. On the hollow strip text, inverted and returned. Shelf accounts sprouted names they had been designed to conceal. Auction proceeds threaded to a list of stations that had paid twice for the same ice at prices set by scarcity, the quorum gamed. The coolant grid Tanya had lost to seizure appeared as an offset, then an offset to the offset, when Index located a clerk's quiet sale to a cousin. Gasps snapped like dry leaves as numbers nailed meanings to walls. Teach them with returns, not ruins. Refunds calculated, Index said privately. Aggregate exceeds the quorum's demand by 1.5 factors. Charging interest per their scarcity metric generates a surplus large enough to power the ring lights for 2 cycles. Public Mara replied. On the hollow strip, the corridor posted a preliminary ledger entry, quorum, Luyten's step, returns due. A progress bar blinked from red toward amber as tugs sent the coolant grid back on tiny sleds pulled by propulsion, more used to shuttling luxury crates than necessities. Clerks scrolled names. Valis's jaw ticked. We don't accept your mirror, he said. You are not a star court. You accepted our corridor when you stepped into it, Jules said without heat. You accepted the mirror when you spoke your method. You accepted the rate when you demanded it. Valis's gaze flickered to his clerks. Fear made even his polish look damp. We can block your beacon, he said. Cut power. Close air. Don't force. A child held up a glow stick green as a new shoot. You can't close air, the child said. Air goes where it wants. The ledger closes when lives open. The first set piece had landed. The ring lights climbed from bare bones, glow to honest brightness. People blinked slow, as if waking under a summer morning, and not under a dwarf's cold heat. The court corridor thrummed with approval. Someone began to hum a work song older than the doctrine that had tried to tax it. Then escalation. The quorum's tender broadcast a notice of collateral custody for the entire station. Its grapples engaged with the creak of old wood under new strain. The docking arms tensed as if the station itself had clenched teeth. Mara tasted copper. Index options. We can cut grapples with torch lines, Rook said, rolling his shoulders. Ask forgiveness later. We won't cut metal before we cut math, Jules said. Both Mara said. But math first. There was a shimmer in the near dark like heat above a stove, and a secondary signature hit their passive array. Not quorum. Not station. Index tightened its voice. Another fleet. Gray hulls. No insignia. They're watching the lesson. Pirates, Rook asked hopefully because pirates were simple. No, Index said. Students or examiners. Mara adjusted the mic, feeling its cool, knurled edge against her palm. Prefect Valis, she said, your grapples threaten life by stress. By corridor of law, that's a hostile act. Disengage and accept audit, or explain under oath why your ship may lawfully squeeze citizens to enforce a tax. Valis held himself still, very still, weight balancing on a doctrine, like a man on a slick board over rapids. He did not answer immediately. He read the crowd, the glow sticks, the coolant grid, inching back the mirrored entries, rilling in merciless fairness. Explain your compassion, he said finally, and I'll explain my grip. Compassion is not charity, Mara said. It's arithmetic that keeps lungs open. Jules touched her elbow. Commander. His eyes flicked to the gray hulls. Let them watch, she said. Maybe they bring test proctors. Maybe they bring thieves, Rook muttered. In either case, Index said Resum teaching. In the market ring under lights, that had learned to glow again, a florist who never had flowers, set bundles of wire in a jar and called them stems. She wrapped them in paper and handed them to a couple who had welded beams together and called them a house. A little boy chased a paper ship along a floor seam that hummed like a river. Someone burned the last of the cardamom, and the station smelled briefly like a feast. Mara stepped back to the corridor mic. Second remedy, she said. We propose a suspension of collateral custody pending the Star Court. We will convene Aurora Court by beacon within the hour. Quorum may argue doctrine in full there. Citizens will watch. Your Star Court, Valis said, was designed to shame kings. It was designed to weigh, Jules said. Kings and hungers alike, Fine Valis said. His eyes were sunned stone, everything else sand sloughing away. We'll speak before your Aurora. He gestured to his crew. Grapples hummed loose, a relieved hush rustling down the handrails as the claws withdrew. Before the second set piece, Mara sent Rook to the air recyclers with a hand team and a crate of parts she'd brought from the frigate. Hold the pressure steady, she said. We may shout a lot soon. You planning to shout law into their bones? Rook grinned, but it faltered at the edges. Or into mine. Into mine first, she said, to make sure it fits. Rook lumbered to the ladder-well boots, booming like friendly thunder. Jules smoothed his tie. Index Mara thought those gray hulls. Listening channels open, Index replied. Their lead is called Charter. They don't broadcast doctrine. They broadcast silence. Make a note, Mara said. Already etched, Index said. We teach by numbers and remember by ledgers, never by collars. The in-universe note slid across a soft place in Mara's mind, like a bookmark. It made her throat tight. The Aurora beacon flowered. It was a simple thing, a ring of light, a rise in tone, a posting that duplicated itself across any display that let it. It did not need to wager spectacle. It trafficked in attention. The station quieted the way a kitchen quiets when a bread knife touches crust. By Aurora Court protocol, Mara said we call a public inquiry on gratitude tax and residual host custody. We require the quorum to speak its method fully, including harm and offset. We invite the charter fleet to observe without interference. Any intervention will be taken as contempt. She looked at Valis. He looked at the gray hulls. Begin with definitions, Jules said. Always. Gratitude. Valis began resurfacing a concept until it shone. A host's due. Survival as debt. Payment as virtue. Custody, Jules said. A control that begins as protection and crystallizes into ownership. Gentle, Valis said. Slow cuts bleed less. Bleeding less is still bleeding, Tanya muttered. She had wormed closer, her jaw set. She smelled of coolant and lemon. The court logged each definition in the ledger, a polite algorithm that nodded, and said, Are you sure? When the quorum's grip trembled, the algorithm asked again, Are you sure? Valis's clerk whispered against his ear. He lifted his chin. We propose an amicus from the charter fleet, he said. Balance requires a third voice. Charter refuses, Index reported privately. They send a 3-word message, count us later. Mara kept her mouth from twitching into a smile. Amicus denied, she said. Proceed. No shadow, only scale. The second set piece began as a rehearsal and shifted into a duel. Jules asked for the calculation path. Valis provided a list. Index threaded it against actuals. Citizens read along. The lemon cleanser smell faded under the scent of warm plastic. Screens heated under fingers as people scrolled faster than fear. A crewman in quorum gray flinched as Index pinned his personal shelf to a rescue purchase he'd filed under miscellany. The corridor did not sneer. It observed. The crewman sagged like a sheet in rain. Valis fought well. He was, after all, a priest of numbers, even if his altar had cut ropes under velvet. He found cases where the quorum had defended lanes without benefit. He pointed to a pirate's brand scorched into a tug hull and said, "Who paid that scar?" He had a list of station lives saved by quorum escorts, and some in the crowd nodded, because truth did not shatter under mirror light. It reflected, and honest things could bear seeing. "Do not deny their rescue," Mara said quietly to Jules. "Acknowledge, then count." Jules nodded and did it, and the glow sticks bobbed as if a small wind had passed. When Valis gestured to the corridor cameras and said, "This is theater," Mara did not dignify it. "Theater is truth with a stage," she said. "Men cut collars in the dark. We speak here." Third escalation whispered in charters' gray hulls, drifted closer pretending drift, when in fact they leaned. Their shadows crossed the port. The light changed as if the dwarf had hiccuped. The station's rim creaked. Someone's cup rolled tinkling against a bolt. Charter broadcasts a new message, index said. "Counting begins with silence," Poets, Jules said dryly. "Exam proctors," Rook muttered over comms from the recycler stack. "Air is holding. If they squeeze us, we'll know." "Let them watch our math," Mara said. "No one learns from a closed book." In the market ring under brighter lights that showed the scuffs and the polish, both a child traced the mirrored ledger entries with one finger on the screen, and then tried to trace them in the air, making loops that unspooled where they were drawn. His mother pulled his hand down gently and kissed his fingertips as if they had ink on them. Mara leaned into the mic. "Prefect Valis," she said, "we propose a bond." Valis lifted a brow. "We post, you post. You post returns, we post an apology if error arises," Mara said. "If our mirror miscalculates, we will pay interest in the same coin we require of you." Jules flicked her a careful look. She ignored it. Bold Valis said, "You risk a neck." "We don't wear collars," Mara said. He smiled, finally small and cutting. "No," he said. "You grow your own spines." He turned to confer with his clerks. Their hands moved like fish under ice. Index tracked the rhythms and guessed they were not discussing only bonds. The grapples had retracted, but the tugs could still nudge. Commander Index whispered open a blade under the cloth. "We promised no blood," Mara thought. "A blade is for cutting paper," Index said. "A clause, perhaps." "Offer one," Mara said. Index projected a soft blue text near the hollow strip, a clause that had dust on it from disuse. It felt like cracking a window long painted shut. "Rescue first, then reckoning." It was old law from a disaster century when ice lanes iced and pirates ran like wolves. The clause required hosts to provide immediate risk mitigation before any debt computation, under penalty of doubled returns if harm occurred during delay. Prefect Valis Mara said, "By your own doctrine, harm invites cost. While we count the station's lights were low, your grapples stressed time. Invoke rescue first, and show us a host's duty." He stared at the clause as if it had crawled out of a tomb. He knew it. How could he not? Quorum's earliest charters had sworn by it. It had protected their staples before they learned to price gratitude. His face said he feared the precedent more than the penalty. Whispered among Quorum Index said to Mara is a line, "There is no first duty, only first advantage." Teach them different, Mara thought. Valis exhaled. "Quorum accepts rescue first," he said. Gasps, not because it was generous, because it was rare. "We'll put it on the board," Jules said. On the hollow strip, a new entry blinked, "Duty accepted. Rescue first." The word confirmed pulsed like a heartbeat forming, a tremor through the deck. Not a threat. The subtle give when a structure moves toward a shape it prefers. Charter's gray hulls held distance. They made no sound, but the silence rattled like a coin in a jar. Commander Rook said over comms, "I have a thing." "Report," she said quietly. "You remember the coolant valves," Tanya cried over, Rook said. "We're reinstalling them and they're stamped with a microplate." Not Quorum. Charter. Probably a donation a while back, passed hand to hand. Someone wrote, "For the day when someone counts us fairly," in microtext along the rim. "Poetry again," Jules said. "Arithmetic in verse," Mara replied. "It travels faster." "Commander Index," said the bond. Valis Mara asked. He nodded reluctantly. Quorum bonds to refund under mirror audit interest included. You bond to apologize in the same corridor if your mirror harms our standing by error. We already have, Mara said. The corridor remembers. Then Valis said, teach your station to track what it owes. Mara tipped her chin toward the crowd. We're teaching what we're owed first. He almost laughed. Almost. In the aurora's light, sweat made him human. That was its own lesson. No caller can measure a breath. They took a pause to draft the bond text words like bolts tightened by fingers that had turned valves and pages. While they worked, the crowd thinned enough to breathe. Someone started playing a coded patch on a plastic crate that sounded like rain on a roof. Someone else hummed the same broken work song. A boy approached Mara, thin as a rail hair fluffed by static. Is law always so long? He asked. It should never be longer than a lungful, she said. And when his brow furrowed at the metaphor, she added, it should be bearable while holding your breath. He nodded, satisfied with that, because it felt like something his grandmother would say. He handed her a scrap of wire twisted into a loop. For luck, he said. She wore it on her index finger like a ring and felt the faint bite of the twist. Rook returned from the recycler's forearms flecked with honest dirt. Air's steady, he said. If quorum squeezes, we'll hear the station complain before it screams. Good, Mara said. I prefer complaints to screams. Commander Index said. A private note from Charter. Read it. 3 words again, Index said. Ask your mirror. Mara lifted her eyes to the gray hulls. For the first time, she thought they might not be examiners at all. They might be something rarer, a people who had been taught by numbers once and were looking for their teacher's handwriting. We'll ask later, she thought to Index. Now we finish our first lesson, agreed, Index said, and then we grade. While the bond language rolled across the holostrip, Valis leaned toward his mic, as if into a wind. Commander Ilias, he said. How do you make citizens accept an apology? Your bond seems cheap otherwise. Words without weight. We put it where they can break it, Mara said. If they don't accept it, it's not finished. That is not law, he said. It's the rest of it, she said. He watched her with the interest of a man who had met a new tool and did not know if it would fit his hand. The bond sealed with a chime that felt like a glass kissed by a finger. Text scrolled once more. People clapped, uncertain at first, and then sure like hands remembering a rhythm. Commander Jules said softly, the third escalation. She tilted her head. Now, he said, eyes on Charter's gray ships, where lights winked like the lids of watchers, trying not to be noticed. Prefect Valis Mara said we have 2 mirror maneuvers in reserve. One returns your tax along your own math. We have shown that. The other returns your method. If you seize the ledger, writes you seized. If you squeeze the ledger, writes you squeezed. If you call it gentle, the ledger writes the choke. You threaten, Valis said. I forecast, Mara said. Forecasts use prior weather. You taught us to post. He considered, and then he made another unexpected choice. And what do you lose, he asked. 2 things, Mara said, without letting the court steal her honesty. We lose time. Counting takes it. We lose face with those who wanted us to strike, not speak. She glanced briefly at Rook, who did not flinch. We will pay that cost. Valis nodded slowly, as if something inside him had acknowledged a debt he had not counted before. Maybe, he said, your apology will not always be for error. Maybe not, she said. Beyond the port, the dwarf breathed heat into metal, and the metal sang back in tiny pings. In the market ring, the florist who never had flowers took the jar of wire stems and for once saw them in light that made even the twist shine. She smiled not because a doctrine broke, but because a count began. The charter fleet edged a meter closer, then stopped as precisely as if a line had been painted in vacuum. Index Mara said, how much time on our Aurora? Enough for a closing before noon, Index said. They will want lunch. The breath metaphor was apt. Then we close this breath, she murmured. She lifted the mic. Witnesses, she said, you have heard the method by which you were bound. You have seen returns calculated by your opponent's arithmetic. You have watched a bond form. If there is a piece of this you wish to carve with your own hands, speak now. Joka's thin voice came again. I'll count the valves in hydroponics, he said. We always had less than the board said. Tanya nodded. I'll log the temperature every hour. The teacher raised his chalk-stained fingers. I'll teach the math that measures a breath. The old woman in the mended coat said nothing. She simply stood straighter, as if a weight had been moved from one shoulder to another, and balance temporarily improved. Mara nodded. Then we adjourned to maintenance and to ledgers, she said. Prefect Vallis, we reconvene at second bell to draft a municipal schedule for the returns. Accepted, he said. His voice had sand again, but the water that made it had changed. She stepped back and let the aurora's light cool. The corridor of law dimmed to the degree that let the ring look like itself instead of a sermon. She was about to unclip the mic when Rook's voice hit her calm like a wrench dropped from a height. Commander, he said, tight as wire, you need to see this. Charter just pinged our mirror with a key. What kind of key? Mara asked. A black audit, Rook said. They've done this dance before. They want us to open their ledger. Jules's head snapped toward her. If we accept that we may be counted in turn, we always planned to be, Mara said. She looked at the gray hulls at Charter's clean silence. She looked at Vallis, whose eyes said, you will regret the kindness you kept for yourself. Index warmed her ear like a hand. We can open a slit, it said, enough to peek without bleeding. No, she said. If we ask a world to show its math, we show ours. The crowd had begun to disperse, but some eyes still turned toward her, because some people knew when a pivot was about to happen, even if the floor did not announce it. The lemon cleanser scent had finally yielded to a smell like cool stone after rain. She lifted the mic a final time, and the sound of the crowd's hush was not awe or obedience. It was concentration. There was a difference, and it mattered. We have one more posting, she said. Charter has invited us to open our mirror to their ledger. We will accept. We will count them, and in reciprocity, we will be countable. Vallis laughed softly, then small as a knife. You will make a poor king, he said. Then a good neighbor, she replied. In the market ring, the florist who never had flowers lifted a wire stem and held it against the light until it threw a thin shadow like an ink stroke across the paper. The aurora flared once more, as Index negotiated a secure corridor between mirrors, one frame of numbers to another. Somewhere a relay clicked. Somewhere a clerk took a breath. Somewhere a child held a glow stick higher. Mara glanced at Jules. He had an expression she had learned to trust, worried, impressed, hungry, to see if a principle could hold. Ready, she asked. As a lung, he said. She nodded to Index. The fleet mind touched the key. The corridor of law brightened to a careful, brilliant white. The public ledger shimmered as if it had swallowed sunlight, and a new pane slid into place with a soft, decisive snap. The title burned plain. Charter. Mirror opened. Public inquiry invited. The pane did not show treasure. It showed wounds disguised as balance. Charter's ledger unfolded like careful handwriting on old cloth dates, ports, escort routes, names of children born aboard gray hulls measured against rations promised and actually received. It smelled like engine sealant in memory, every line a patch that kept a ship flying when doctrine wanted it to kneel. The corridor's microphones caught a sound none of the clerks expected, people reading softly in unison, the chant of arithmetic becoming a prayer. Protocol, Jules murmured, says their opening defines our scope. Scope is almost everything, Index said. They are not shy. Prefect Vallis Mara said you asked what we lose. Here is something else: we lose privacy. We prefer it to callers. Speak so clearly your enemies understand. Charter's lead, an older captain with hair cut neat as paper, appeared on the auxiliary pane. His name posted as Havel, followed by the rank they used when they didn't want to be king's steward. He nodded once to the corridor of law, once to the crowd, once to Vallis, as acknowledgement that adversaries still stood upright in light. Steward Havel Mara said, "Welcome to our ledger. Commander Ilyas," he said, voice like a boat plank polished by hands. "We've watched your corridor. We like the tilt of it." Valis's eyebrow twitched. "This is not your quarrel," he said. "It is our method," Havel replied. "We were collared until we built a mirror so exact it cut only the rope. Do not drag a net when a string will do." Charter's pane displayed a sequence from 5 cycles prior. A quorum convoy had claimed residual custody on a way station after a medical resupply. Charter's mirror had accepted quorum's doctrine and written it backward through the convoy's own bonds until the clause that enabled custody snapped itself shut. No fire. No seizure. Just a choke on a choke. "Your mirror is blunter," Havel said. "But it teaches. We offer a key to sharpen it." Index brightened in Mara's ear. "They're offering a calculus for collateral chains. If we accept our returns, attach cleanly to shelf accounts across 2 sectors." Cost, Jules asked. Transparency Index said. "And a promise not to turn the blade toward simple hunger." "We weren't going to," Mara said. "We're not here to starve a people to feed our pride." "Post the promise," Havel said, as if he'd overheard. "Promises rot if unposted." Mara glanced at Jules. He nodded. She lifted the mic. "Corridor of Law posts a humane use clause," she said. "Mirrors will not strike food, medicine, or air, even when a doctrine points that way. Any party invoking mirror returns consents to this limit." The hollow strip accepted the clause with a chimed tone that felt like a hallway light coming on at midnight. Children in the back mimicked the chime with their mouths 2 beats and a breath. "Math does not hunt the hungry." Valis spread his hands. "You band together," he said to Havel and Mara. "The rescued make a choir. Very moving. The saved make rules," Havel said. "They also pay." Charter posted returns 3 times last cycle when our sums overreached. We apologized each time. Ask the stations who counted us back. A woman stepped into the mic line without waiting for permission. She wore the quirked half-smile of someone who enjoyed being scolded and loved scolding more. "I'm from Bark Thread," she said. Charter's apology came with bread. It tasted like metal because everything does here. But it was bread. "Thank you," Havel said, almost bowing. Mara lifted a palm. "We drift," she said gently. "Prefect Valis, you accepted rescue first. You bonded to returns under mirror. Charter's key will help. Is there any doctrine left you wish to speak before the Star Court concludes first sitting?" Valis swallowed. "One," he said. "The host's privilege. No audit is allowed to attach to a host's sovereign reserves." "Define sovereign," Jules said. "Define reserve. Fuel for emergency. Hulls to retreat. Wages pre-committed," Valis said. He stood straighter, reciting from law like a man reciting a poem written by a parent he both loved and resented. "The host who is stripped cannot host." "Post the carve-out," Mara said to Index, then narrow it. Index projected a crisp bracket, sovereign reserves limited to emergency thresholds, subject to public declaration. Excess treated as shelf. "Public declaration," Jules said, "not private whisper." "Your clause sets a trap," Valis said. "It sets a threshold," Mara replied. "If you hoard under sovereign paint, the mirror peels it." A clerk near Valis had the misfortune to look guilty at exactly the wrong moment. Index tagged him not with humiliation, but with a small blue dot that meant, "We will ask you later if you're ready to be honest." Truth calls names gently, then louder. Second bell neared. The dwarf's light shifted through the port copper to nickel the way flame colors change on a cheap stove. In the market ring, someone opened a tin of pickled lemon, and the sour smell made everyone's mouth water. People were hungry. People were always hungry. "Adjournment for drafting," Jules said. "We need to pack these into orders. We also need to eat," Rook said. "The station makes terrible stew. It tastes like welded optimism." "Serve 2 bowls," Mara said. "One for optimism." They broke the assembly into 3 circles: bond drafting, sovereign reserves, definition, and return logistics. The hum in the corridor fell to a work murmur, the sound of paper keys, breath. Rook ladled stew with an engineer's precision, making every scoop equal. The old woman in the mended coat took the second bowl and carried it to the quorum clerk with the blue dot. He didn't meet her eyes. She put the bowl in his hands anyway and patted his fingers as if they were a grandson's. Commander Index said softly, "Quorum tender just spun up a tool," Type Mara asked. Obscura Index said, "It scrubs ledger tails. If it runs, it will cut 3 months of postings from their board. They'll cry sovereign and call it tidying." "How long?" Mara asked. 9 minutes to prime, 3 to erase," Public Mara said. The hollow strip posted Quorum Tool Obscura. Priming. The corridor of law did not accuse, it notified. The mic line hissed with the intake of anger deliberately held back to keep it from becoming fire. Valis's head snapped toward the tender. "Cancel," he said without turning the mic on. His voice still carried in the corridor, because some truths don't need amplification to move weight. "Cancel." The corridor sees. "One clerk in the tender is arguing to proceed," Index reported. "He believes if you scrub, you can rebuild a gentler story." "Name?" Mara asked. The blue dot quivered. The old woman squeezed his hand. "No cleaner can unboil a bone," she said. "Leave the soup as it is." He began to cry, silent face clean of spectacle, and nodded. "You cannot erase what witnesses hold." Obscura powered down. The hollow strip replaced its priming meter with a plain line cancelled by quorum. People clapped again, because sometimes restraint deserves as much applause as resistance. "Costs returned," Index said. "We can execute the system-scale mirror now that Charter's key sits in our hand. It will attach to shelf accounts across the quorum's chain restricted by humane use and sovereign thresholds. Returns will pool at a segregated address visible to the corridor." "Do it," Mara said, "and keep your tone like still water." Index's arrays sang a harmonic just past hearing something you can feel in your molars and in the tender place behind your nose. Across 2 sectors, shelf accounts discovered they were no longer private furniture. They were cupboards in a public kitchen. The mirror wrote their names in clean script and set their contents walking home. On the hollow strip, numbers moved like rain down a glass pane. The coolant grid Tanya loved counted back. The ice auction's excess counted back. A pair of bracelets seized during inspection counted back. The owner laughed through tears no one had asked permission to spill. The clerk with the blue dot put both hands on the stew bowl and did not spill it. His fingers shook too hard for anything else. Numbers walk like children returning down a lit street. 2 costs on our end, Index said in Mara's ear. "First, to run this with humane use filters and cross-sector attachments, I need to burn one of my deeper caches. I will lose recall of a navigation puzzle I learned in the storm years." "I'll hold it for you," Mara thought. "You cannot," Index said, almost tender. "Human heads remember differently. But you can remember I told you." "Posted," she said, and felt the first honest ache of the day. Second cost. Rook said over comms one of our torch teams cut too quickly to free a seized panel. A mechanic named Selah lost 3 fingertips. She laughed. Then she cried. "We'll bring her to Med. Put her name on our returns log for stipend," Mara said tightly. "She doesn't pay for losing pieces of herself under our banner." "We posted a 3rd cost earlier," Jules said quietly, eyes on the drafting team. "We promised to apologize if our mirror overreaches. We will use it soon." "Why?" Mara asked, turning her head. "Because," Jules said with the calm of a man who knew when a blade would nick flesh, "we will overreach. We are not perfect. It is better to budget the bruise. Accept the bruise and keep the hand open." Numbers settled. The corridor dimmed from brilliant to useful. People stepped back to see the whole picture now that details had finished screaming. The Aurora beacon's heat ticked cool. Preliminary tally index said aloud for everyone. Net returns owed by quorum to Luyten's step 112,000 credits and in-kind gear equal to 6 station stacks. Interest accrues if posting delays beyond 5 days. Humane use and sovereign thresholds respected. Valis swallowed again. He had swallowed many times today, and each had tasted different. "We will appeal," he said, because that was his job, and also because that was how men told themselves they were not entirely changed yet. "You will," Jules said to the Aurora Circuit. "Meanwhile, you post." A beat of quiet fell long enough for people to know it, not fear it. Then Charter's pain brightened. "Commander Ilyas Havel said count us." Mara let out a breath. "By your invitation, we will display your ledger and test your bonds under the same humane use and sovereign filters. Citizens, if you find an error, you will tell them. They will apologize publicly at this mic." Charter streamed their numbers in air cleared by humility. They had posted their rescues, a pirate taken in and taught to weld, a station torque instructor, whose fee they returned when he knocked 40% off for pity, a convoy they refused to escort because it was smuggling children. The children they fed. They had posted their failures, one error in hazard pay that starved a hull for a week, a miscalculation that closed a clinic 2 days too long, an apology with bread that arrived stale. 2 flags, Index said. Both minor, both already posted with apology and interest. Their book squeaks. "Because it's used," Jules said. "A new book is always silent, right where it can creak." Commander Rook said, "We have pirates." "Of course. Because arithmetic that makes light draws moths." 3 small craft bobbed inward on lazy plumes, noses tilted to the tender, where sovereign reserves had glittered before being declared. They smelled like hot ozone and old fear even before vacuum let them scent nothing at all. Charter Mara asked. "We can intercept," Havel said. "But if we do, your lesson stands behind our hulls. Better if your corridor carries into space." Index Mara said, "Project the corridor of law into a broadcast net around the tender and those craft. Make their comms a room we can speak in." "Done," Index said. Their hails bleed into the mic. "Pirate craft," Mara said. "You drift into a corridor of law. The doctrine today is rescue first. That includes rescuing you from dumb hunger. You may claim safe passage by cutting engines and flipping your holds for inspection. You will be fed. You will not be collared." Silence, then a laugh that tried to be hard and failed at the edges. "You gonna shame us into church, lady?" No, Mara said. "I will count you into a better week." "You can count another," asked curiosity, worming into the channel, like a child under a fence. "We can count." Joka said, breathless, having sprinted to the nearest comm with the flush of someone who wanted a turn. "I'll count your tools. I'll post the numbers so everyone sees." "Kid," the first pirate said, "don't post my wrench count." "We will redact items used to keep you alive and lawful," Jules said evenly. "Humane use applies to pirates too if they choose it. Some men want a collar. Offer them a ladder." 2 of the pirate craft powered down. The third twitched closer to the tender, tempted by a sovereign threshold he mistook for a buffet sign. Charter snapped him with a tractor and held him like a mother hauling a child off a fence. The corridor logged rescued from a worse choice. Havel did not gloat. He tucked, dragged, and let the craft breathe in safe water. "Add another cost to our column," Rook said softly. "We'll escort those craft to a rehab yard. That's fuel we won't get back." "Post it as the price of keeping our throat unowned," Mara said. The day stretched across second bell and into the hour when tiredness makes tongues short and tempers sincere. Drafts turned to orders. Orders turned to posted entries. The dwarf's heat slipped toward its redder end. The corridor's lights compensated with honesty that did not blind. "Time to close," Jules said. "Close us," Mara replied, and he shook his sleeves like a violinist adjusting for the final run. He read the remedies once more so even men who didn't like to read could say later that they'd heard. He posted the bond language one last time. He wrote the sovereign reserve definition like a door measurement on a wall. He added the humane use clause like a lintel no one could plausibly bump a head on and claim ignorance. "Precedent lock," he said at last. Mara took the mic herself. By Aurora Court Authority and Corridor of Law Adhesion, the following entries are posted with force rescue. First is mandatory in all Aurora jurisdiction corridors. Residual host custody, also called gentle collar, is revoked as a method of enforcement. Gratitude tax is converted to elective mutual aid assessment, requiring public calculation paths. Failure to post converts levy to returns with interest. These entries bind upon posting. They are enforceable via open mirrors and witness quorum. Make a law that survives a bad year. The hollow strip did not cheer. It simply changed color where the new law lay, the way skin darkens where it will scar a useful thickening. Confirmed blinked beside each precedent lock, slow enough for everyone to count 3 pulses and know the beat. Vallis's face did a strange thing, a flicker that was not anger or defeat. It was relief, briefly, at being dragged out of a river that he had been born in and had mistaken for land. He covered it with a scowl, because men trained on doctrine blur their tells. "We will test your locks," he said. "Good," Mara said. "Wheels should squeal when they roll. That's how you know they're not frozen." The crowd began to dissolve into lines toward Stu, into huddles around screens, into laughter that still sounded like a job half done. The corridor temperature dropped 2 degrees as the beacon cooled. Metal pinged that small, tender music after heat. "Commander Index," said the apology. "Where did we overreach?" she asked. The bracelets Index said. "They were seized during inspection, yes. But one link was broken by a quorum guard when he lost his temper, and our return counted it as intact. The owner logged it as such because she wanted a bigger number to be a bigger victory. We should apologize for the miscount and fix it downward." Jules winced. "Unpopular," he said. "Necessary," Mara said. She walked to the mic. The crowd quieted again, because they were learning the rhythm of law talk, draft, post, eat, and sometimes admit. "I miscounted," she said. "We miscounted. A returned item was logged as whole when it was broken during seizure. The owner accepted the whole count because anger makes liars of all of us. We correct it now. We pay interest in apology 2 days power to hydroponics. We will post the error and our thanks for being allowed to fix it. People trust a scale that shows its scratches." The woman with the bracelets stepped forward, eyes bright. "I wanted my anger big," she said. "I'll take my bracelets small and my lights on. Laughter, not scorn. The laughter of a workshop where someone drops a bolt and everyone hears." Cost posted Index said. "Hydroponics receives 48 hours above baseline. Tanya just swore in a way my language model cannot print." Goodrook said, grinning. "Her swears smell like fresh paint." Havel raised a hand for attention. "Charter will match," he said. 2 days for hydroponics from us because apology is easier when the bowl is full." "Gratitude," Mara said. Mutual, Havel replied. "Sunlight is a receipt you feel on skin." By late afternoon, the market ring looked less like a market and more like a classroom after a good day. Chalk dust in the air, Hunger's temporarily convinced a plan scrawled across 3 boards that no one would erase for fear of forgetting it. The dwarf's light threw long metal shadows like extra rails beside the real ones. Someone spilled a jar of pepper, and suddenly everyone smelled heat. Commander Index said softly in the private channel, where it talked to her like a sister. "We've received 16 notices from stations, 2 jumps out. They saw the bond. They saw rescue first. They ask for a corridor of law visit. We will plan one," she thought. "We do not become a traveling theater. We become a library." Libraries Travel Index said, in heads. Rook leaned on the rail beside her, looking big and gentle as a dock piling. His forearms bore new scrapes. He hadn't noticed. He had a smear of stew on his cheek he had definitely noticed, and had left there as a joke with himself. "You did it," he said. "We did enough," she said. "I still want to punch Vallis," he said. "Tomorrow," she said lightly enough to change his posture without mocking his bones. Jules joined them, tie loosened 2 honest inches. "I miss courtrooms with wood," he said. "This metal sings and I like it, but wood eats sound and makes men admit faster." Next time, Mara said, we'll hold a hearing in a lumber yard. Next time, Jules said, pleased, we'll bring bread again. Tanya jogged past, hair escaping its tie like wires out of a sleeve. Lights to hydroponics now, she yelled joyfully. Not tomorrow now. Go make something grow, Rook called. Watch me, she said, and the smell of lemon cleaner lifted off her like a resolved argument. You win when something lives. Valis approached, no clerks, hands visible. Steward, he said to Havel, surprising himself with the word. Commander. Advocate. I will not praise your method. I will work within it until my people teach me a better one. That is all any of us can say, Havel replied. Work makes doctrine honest. Precedent posted, Jules said. We'll see you at the appellate hearing. You will, Valis said. His eyes slid briefly to the old woman in the mended coat. He nodded to her. The nod cost him more than anything he had signed. She nodded back, merciful in the way only the wounded can be when they smell a man trying not to drown. The corridor of law dimmed to a simple stripe, no longer a stage, just a guide rail. The Aurora Beacon's housing vented a calm white plume the size of a breath. Children chased its shadow on the floor and learned the shape their feet made against it. Mara stood at the viewport. The brown dwarf pulsed steady, a heart that had never met a doctrine. The glass was cool against her palm. A little wire ring bit her finger where the twist had sunk. She liked the reminder. Index, she said, write the epilogue. I cannot write epilogues, Index said. I can only write postings. Write one that feels like both. Index opened the public ledger and typed in its crisp, invisible way, the way a good clerk moves, so your eye stays on meaning and not the hand. The entry scrolled large enough for anyone in the ring to read. Aurora Court Entry, number 9081 Rescue. First protocol confirmed. Residual host custody invalidated in Aurora districts. Mutual aid assessment standardized with public calculation paths. Returns executed with humane use filters. Bonds sealed. Precedent locked. For a moment, the entry held like a held note. Then the ledger applied the only flourish it allowed itself, a pulse that said yes in the language of machines. The ring smelled of stew and lemon and warm plastic and a jar of pepper and someone's spilled tea. Outside, the dwarf's light pushed a thin red line along the edge of a hull until it glowed like a promise that might keep. Metal pinged once more. The sound was tiny and carried forever. Mara looked at the crowd, at Rook's scraped hands, at Jules's soft-tied knot, at Havel's steady mouth, at Valis's tired jaw, at Tanya already running toward plants, at Joka counting out loud and getting it right. She spoke for less than a minute, because law done well leaves room for breath. I have hated collars since I learned the word, she said. Today we cut two, the one on your neck and the one on our pride. We will cut more. We will fail sometimes and pay for it. We will not trade throats for speed. We will write what we do where anyone can read it. Teach your children to count in public. Teach your enemies to count in daylight. If you meet a man who calls gentleness a chain, show him a bond that holds without choking. If you meet a woman who wears a doctrine like a metal, polish it until she sees her face. She touched the ledger with one finger and felt absurdly that it was warm. Public ledger entry, blinking confirmed. We return costs. We do not wear chains.